So, what was your experience like for your undergraduate at SUNY Purchase?
I loved SUNY Purchase. I absolutely loved being there. And I think the biggest thing that made it such a wonderful experience was at the time, the environmental science program was very small. So I was taking a lot of classes with the same professors, and my cohort, the people that I came in with, was also very small. So we were all taking classes together, taking classes, different classes with the same professors over and over. So they really knew who I was. They knew all of us as a group. And it was just really, really fun to be able to work together and get the sort of academic attention that we needed if we ever needed help or if we ever were concerned about a particular project or anything like that. And one of the great things about about SUNY Purchase in general is that they require every senior to do some sort of senior project or a senior thesis. And in the sciences, that comes in the form of, original research and doing a research project. So they like at SUNY Purchase, they really, and the environmental science department, of course, I really learned how to do research. That was my first ever research project. And that for sure helped me get into grad school.
What
So I
was
had a
your
wonderful
research?
experience. Oh my gosh, I was looking at the concentrations of lead in turtle shells in snapping turtle shells from the Bronx River. So at the time, I was volunteering at the herpetology department at the Bronx Zoo, and I was very fortunate to have at the time John Baylor was the curator of herpetology at the Bronx Zoo, and he was like a turtle guy. And so when he had heard about my idea for a project, he was very generous and very helpful in allowing me to use the facilities at the zoo to incubate the turtle eggs and then keep my samples, in a freezer there until I could get them analyzed somewhere else. So he was very encouraging and very helpful in helping me to complete my senior project. And as you can imagine, they had very high levels of lead in their shells.
And was it just snapping turtles or was it other types of
I was
turtles?
no, I was focused on snapping turtles because it was kind of I don't want to say fortuitous, but at the zoo, the horticulture department has these huge mountains of mulch. So if ever, a tree comes down or something, or they have to take a tree down in the park, they mulch the tree and then they keep the mulched, wood in these huge piles, like behind the scenes where the public doesn't get to see. But the turtles would come out of the river and dig into these mulch piles and nest in the mulch piles. So what was happening was the horticulture department was always calling the herpetology department and be like, "Hey, we found some more turtle eggs. Can you come and get them? So we don't destroy this nest." And what they used to do is they would incubate them and then, whatever would hatch, they would release back into the river. And I saw that sort of as an opportunity to really get some data on these turtles, that are living in a very highly polluted river. And like I said, John Baylor was all for it, and my professors at SUNY Purchase thought it was a great idea. And that's basically how I got started with research.
What was another experience researching possibly like with your furthering after your graduate work?
Let's see. So I started after my undergraduate work, I applied to grad school, and I was accepted at a school in California, and I was elated because I wanted to pursue herpetology as a career. And so I was working with someone in California who, was doing that. All of his research, he had a herpetology lab, so all of his research was reptiles and amphibians, and I was like, this is great. I'm in the right place. And then I went to Argentina to do my master's research. I was working on a specific type of toad that lives in the Andes Mountains, and I was interested in understanding how elevation, because they're found at lower elevations, but then as you go further and further into the Andes, they're, found at really high elevations as well. So I was interested in understanding how elevation affects, I'm sorry, rather how exposure to the sun and UV radiation will affect this production of a certain enzyme that helps to repair DNA, and wanted to see if there was an elevational gradient, like a difference in the production of this particular enzyme. And it was a fantastic experience to get to go to a different country, but it was just a total mess. Like the project fell apart. I had no data. It was so difficult to preserve my samples. And so after that, I was like, I need a break. And I took a break, and then ended up coming back to New York and then finishing my master's at CSI. And I chose CSI because they had an environmental science program. And I was looking for someone who was working with metals and toxic substances because that was something that I was interested in. And I saw that, Bill Wallace was doing things like that. And so I ended up coming back to New York from California and then finishing my master's at CSI. And then I ended up doing a project on metals and salamanders, metals and soils and salamanders in New York State forests. So that was it was a big change from working in Argentina, and it was actually a lot easier. But it was a wonderful project, and that's how I ended up finishing my master's at CSI.
So it's always changing. It's never just one topic that you stick with, and it's always
Yeah, I mean,
whatever's
when
available and
you
interesting.
absolutely when you get into research, I think oftentimes young scientists or young researchers think like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. But having a certain level of flexibility in your thinking, having an open mindset is really helpful because it's not always about the organism. It's more so about the question. What are the questions that you want to answer? And that's one of the beautiful things about scientific research is that you get to follow your passion and you get to follow the things that you're most interested in when you're doing research. And so my current research has nothing to do with reptiles or amphibians, even though I still love them. I think they're fantastic. I just was so curious about microplastic pollution. So when I started understanding more about it and reading about it, I had questions and I couldn't find the answers to those questions in the scientific literature. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to end up doing for a PhD. And then I got in touch with, I mean, many years had passed between my master's and when I started my PhD. And then I got back in touch with Professor Wallace and said, hey, this is what I want to do. How do you feel about it? And he was like, yeah, come on, come back, let's do it. So yeah, so that's true that there's no set, research path necessarily that you have to be on or that you put yourself on. I think research is much more about the questions that you find interesting and the questions that you want to find the answers to.
How long were you in Argentina?
I was there, I think first time I went, I was there for just a few weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then the second time I was there for 5 months or so, maybe 5.5 months, something like that. So it was a great experience. I mean, I learned how to speak Spanish. I learned how to, navigate I wasn't in like Buenos Aires or like a big city. I was in the mountains, in the north western part of the country in the Andes Mountains. So I was living in a small town. And it was a very unique experience, and I'm very glad I went. Now I'm grateful that I have friends in Argentina that I still keep in touch with. So it was wonderful.
That's amazing. And California, like what part of California, what school did you go to?
I was in Southern California. I went to Cal State University at Northridge. And Northridge is, if you guys know, that's where like the big earthquake was back in when was it, the 90s? Um, I think I was a little kiddo back then, so I don't really have much recollection of it. But yeah, so Cal State Northridge is it's in the San Fernando Valley, and it's it's very flat there. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been there, but it's a wonderful school. It has an excellent biology department. Um, it was just not the right fit for me. So I ended up coming back to New York and was very happy to finish here.
What are some things that you do with some of your classes that stand out, or some of your favorite aspects of working here?
Oh man. I mean, the top thing is the research. Like that, I think for any person who's going into science, who wants to do scientific research, that's the the thing that is by far the most interesting, most frustrating, most exciting thing to do. And then just below the scientific research for me is teaching. I love teaching. I love interacting with my students. I love mentoring students. So here's one thing that I've gotten to do as a PhD student, that I was really not able to do as a master's student, is that as a PhD student, you are developing as a scientist, and then you sort of reach this point where like you've got there, you're kind of just like on par with your colleagues, you're no longer like the underling. And Professor Wallace has been very generous and has allowed me to mentor students in his lab. So he'll have undergraduate students or even other master students come in to do their work and to do their projects, and he's sort of allowed me to take the reins and just not take over, but to work with them and guide them and help them through their research and hone their research ideas. And that has just made it very clear to me that as, a scientist who will hopefully one day have their own lab, like, yes, this is where I want to be. I want to be working and mentoring with students. And I want to be helping them become the next generation of scientists. So research and then teaching and mentoring students is like right 1 and 2 right there.
How could students get involved into research or projects that interest them?
That's a great question. So the first thing to do is just volunteer in a lab. Like look on your college website, find the professors that are doing research that is like even a little bit similar to your interests, and then just find them on campus, go to their office hours and say, I'm really interested. I just want to get some experience. Can I do something, anything in your lab? And most of the time, if you're around, like if you're going to be around for a little while longer, maybe if you're not, a senior graduating next semester, but if you're going to be around and on campus, they'll say, yeah, let me get you started. And you'll start off with like basic stuff like cleaning glassware and just organizing things. But if you stick around and you show them that you're committed and you really want to learn about science and how to do science, then they'll start giving you more challenging tasks. And then eventually, probably even within the same semester, you might be helping a master's student with their research, or even helping a PhD student with their research. And like, for example, right now I had a student, she was in my 107 class, who came to me and she's like, I just really want to get some experience in the lab. And I spoke to Professor Wallace and he was like, yeah, great. You can handle her and train her and do whatever, whatever you need doing, she can do that for you. So I helped her learn basics of the lab, and then I helped her to do more specific things that was more involved with my own research. And so that's it. Just find a professor, find someone with a lab who's doing something that you're interested in, and just badger them until they let you volunteer.
What's your favorite class to teach?
Oh, that's tough. I really like the I'm teaching invert zoo right now, and like I said, marine biology is in the fall, and I love them both. But I think I like marine biology more because we get more time in the field. I love learning about like and teaching about like critters and gross bugs, for lack of a better term, but like all of these inverts are so interesting and so weird and gross in their own way. And that's really, really fun. And I get to bring, weird inverts into class to show you guys, which I also really enjoy. But marine biology is just really great because I tend to mix it with ecology, and I love ecology. And then also just being in the field and being able to go out and find, comb jellies and these polychaete worms and just things that I know are there, but maybe your average student is not digging in the mud or looking for things like that. So they get to see it, for the first time, which I think is really fun.
What's like a interesting or funny story that you have in the field in any sort of
Oh
academic
man.
sort of anything you'd like to share?
Oh man. Well, first thing to know that when you're in the field, if like anything and everything can go wrong, and it always does. Like something always goes wrong. Um, I'm trying to think like what is the most. Jeez. I fell into a river once. That was funny. Like I don't know, I was climbing on these rocks, and then I just slipped and went completely just sideways, fell off this rock and fell into a river. But that was fine. I was just wet and miserable for the rest of the day. But let's see, like equipment breaks and duct tape. You always have to have duct tape. That fixes everything. There was one time I was in the field with a team. We were searching in this dry riverbed, and we are just turning over rocks, looking for interesting things. And this was in Argentina, and someone turned over a rock and was like, "Oh, hey, Bruno, come here." So I ran over to see what they found, and it was a massive wolf spider, like a huge wolf spider. I'd never seen a spider that big before. And on
Wow.
her, yeah, on her abdomen, she had all of her babies, like live crawling babies. So she's like this big, and her abdomen is, like the size of my fist, and there's just babies covering it. And I was like, no, thanks. That's it. I almost passed out.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was like I'm not a fan of spiders. I know I teach invert Zoe, but spiders are not my jam, and that was like I almost had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Honestly, jumping stars is pretty cool though.
Spiders in general, we don't get along.
Yeah, any questions?
Does she spend more time, does she think she's spending more time in the lab or like out in the field?
Do you spend more time in the lab or the field?
Definitely the lab. Like that's the rule. It's like, what is it, like 80/20? It's always like much more time in the lab than you spend in the field. And if you want to spend more time in the lab, you can. You can always design your research project to be more lab-based than field-based. But if you are somebody who is working, especially here, and your organism or your question or whatever is affected by the seasons, then you're going to be spending, the warmer spring, probably spring, and summer and into fall out in the field, not always, and then you're going to be spending the rest of the time writing grants, writing papers, crunching your data, so most of your time will be spent in the lab versus the field. But it always depends on, what your questions are and what types of projects you're working on.
What is the grant process for people
Ooh.
in science and requesting?
Yeah, so it's very competitive. Getting grants is very competitive, and I'll give you the short version of the grant process. Is basically you as an individual have to find people, places, organizations that are giving away money to scientists like yourself that are working on projects that you're working on. So for me, I'm working on, it sounds like because I'm working on microplastics that it would be really easy for me to get a whole lot of money because it's sort of a hot topic right now. But granting organizations and funding organizations are very specific in their requirements, and not necessarily requirements of the scientist, but the requirements of the project. And so if you're not working on something that is addressing their specific interests or concerns, then you may not be qualified to receive that grant. So you have to first find an organization that you align with, that will or is willing to give you money, that has a grant available. Then you have to apply for the grant, and that can be anywhere from a single page document where you describe your project and how it fulfills their interests. Or it could be a much more involved type of document where you write a cover letter, and then you have, a 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 page proposal with a fully fleshed out budget and, the bullet points explaining how you will, like how you're going to implement the budget, and then how you are going to connect with the community and explain the research that you've done and how does that impact the community, how does it benefit the community. So the grant process is different depending on the grant, but it's a long process, and you have to be a really good writer. And I know this day and age with AI and ChatGPT and everything, it's almost making it harder to compete for grants, but being a good writer, someone who can communicate well on paper, is very important. And I can't stress that enough to you guys as students, that it's so important to be able to write well. And so you submit those grant applications, and then you wait for months and months and months and months to hear if you've than gotten a grant. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And, you know, when you do, you rejoice. And when you don't, you're like, okay, next, which is the next one I'm going to go for.
And who typically is the grant going to? Like, is this with the schools or is this with a separate outside organization?
Well, usually the grant. So for example, I am, like I said, I am still a PhD student in the Wallace lab. So when we apply for grants, he is the one that actually is applying for the grant, but I'm the one that is writing the proposal for the grant. So if I am trying to get a grant to fund my research, I'm the one that has to write that proposal. And I'm the one that has to really know and understand what my research is about and where I'm going with it. And then he, of course, we work together, we fine tune it, we hone it, and then he's the one that actually puts in the application, and then he's the one that gets the money. So the money doesn't go to me, it goes to the Wallace Lab. And then, you know, we decide how it gets spent based on the budget I submitted to the grant, you know, the granting organization.
This is a separate kind of question, but what made you realize what was the moment you realized you wanted to go into science, or you knew you were a scientist, or that was there
Wow.
ever a moment, or you always knew, or like what was your process like that?
So I was always a curious kid, and I was never afraid of bugs or snakes or anything like that. It just wasn't me, wasn't my thing. And I always loved science, always. And I think I wanted to be a scientist. I think around the time I was like 15 or 16 years old, I knew I wanted to be a scientist, but I didn't really know what type of scientist. I didn't know what type of science I wanted to go into. So I was really interested in going into like criminal justice, and I wanted to be like a forensic scientist. And I was set on that. I was looking at John Jay. I was like, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. And then I got a job at a summer camp, and it was like a nature summer camp. The whole thing was outside. We were all outside with the kids all day, every day, catching frogs, looking at you know, just like scooping mud out of the pond and looking out what types of invertebrates were in the mud. And the whole idea of the summer camp was to have fun, of course, but it was also to teach kids about nature and ecology. And after that experience, that's when I realized, like, wait, I could get paid to do this all the time. Like, this can be a job. And that's when I started looking into biology programs and zoology programs. And I was like, this is it. This is what I need to do for the rest of my life. And that's what I did. I just followed followed my passion. And here I am talking to you guys doing research.
And you worked at the Bronx Zoo too, or you interned there? Was that
Yeah,
there?
so I volunteered at the reptile house, and it
Cool.
was a really wonderful experience. It was a unique experience because I was in college, I was an undergrad, and I grew up going to the Bronx Zoo. Like, I lived in the Bronx when I was a kid, and then we moved up to Yonkers. But you know, I think like it takes like 10 minutes to get to the Bronx Zoo from Yonkers. I don't know. So I was going there all the time. And so for me, as a little kid, I don't know if you guys have been to the Bronx Zoo or been to the reptile house. When you first walk into the reptile house, you walk in those doors, and immediately to the left is the nursery where they have all the baby reptiles. And it's like glass, like you can see the people, you know, the keepers in the nursery working with the animals. And I remember going there. I don't know how many times I thought this, but I remember going there and saying, I want to be in there. I want to be in there doing that. And when I was old enough to be able to volunteer, I did.
That
You know, I
sounds
had a whole
absolutely
application.
awesome.
What's that?
That sounds absolutely awesome.
It was fantastic. Yeah, to have the opportunity to fulfill that like childhood dream was incredible. And I learned so much being there and just working with the people who are working with these incredible animals every day. And you know, so many endangered species that I wouldn't have never, like, maybe I could see them through the glass, but now I'm working with them. Now I'm helping to care for them. And so I was like I said, I was an undergraduate in college, and the internship, they do have an internship there at the herpetology department. And what the intern does is usually they just work 2 days a week, you know, two full days. And they get paid for it. But I was never able to do that during the semester. So instead, what I did was I volunteered for 2 full days a week over the summer, and then I scaled it back for 1 day a week while I was taking classes, you know, at SUNY Purchase. And so I was technically like working the same as the intern there, and they were so great. They were encouraging me to apply for the internship, but I just couldn't make the commitment and do it because I was taking classes. But the experience of just being there and working with those animals and getting to be the person on the other side of the glass was phenomenal. So I would say for any of you guys there, and I know not all of you are science majors, but for any of you guys there, if there's a dream that you have and something that you want to do with your life, like the first step is just get out there and volunteer with someone, anyone who's doing it. And I'm sure someone is going to take you in, someone is going to help you, you know, to make that next step.
You got
How do you work up like the motivations of applying to these internships longer than?
How do you work up the motivation to apply for these type of
Like,
like
I'm scared
internships?
to like apply to these.
Because it's like scary.
I mean, I think at this point, if you would have asked me that question when I was an undergraduate, I think I would have said, what are you talking about? Like I had no fear as an undergraduate. I was like, let me in, I'm gonna do this, I'm here and I'm the best. Now it's a little different. You know, now I sort of understand a little bit more of the realities of what it takes to apply. But I think, and this is not just true of science or, you know, of biology or marine biology, but it's true of any type of pathway that you're on, anything that you want to do. It takes grit and persistence. And if you can just not take no for an answer, then you will be successful. It's just about knocking on all the doors, beating the pavement, not taking no for an answer, and just keep going. Because at some point in your life, someone is going to tell you that you're not good enough, this is not for you, you're in the wrong position. And if you listen to that person, that's it. There goes your dream, your career, or whatever. And then you're going to end up doing something else. But if you know, this is what I have to do, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, you just don't take no for an answer and just keep going. Have that grit. And it's hard. You will fail. You will fail. It happens to everyone. But if you could take that failure and learn from it instead of allowing yourself to be like destroyed by that failure, if you can, you know, feel those feelings and then learn from that failure, then you will be successful. So I would say do your best to put those feelings of fear and inadequacy aside and just do it anyway. Like be brave, right? Being brave is doing the thing that you're afraid of, even though you're still afraid, and just be brave and do it anyway. And if you don't get the response and the answer that you want, try again and just keep going.
You got any questions?
I don't have any at the moment.
No, Chris? Thank you so much. I think this was really, really great.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, guys. I'm so happy to be here with, I mean, you know, virtually be here with you guys. And I'm very glad, Paul, that you were able to start the Marine Biology Club. And so the people that are there in the audience now, are you all bio majors, or are you from different areas of other areas of study?
I'm a bio major right now.
Nice.
I might get into ecology.
So, history, biology, and earth and environmental science. And
Excellent.
then psychology. We got a mix.
History, that's great. I also love history. So I feel like I could have gone science, or I could have gone history. I think I might have been happy doing history, but science is definitely the right spot.